10 minutes. You could be dead in 10 minutes. We have to make those changes immediately. So the buffer system is an immediate system. These two other systems, respiratory and urinary, they can occur minutes to hours to a day later. So they're not in any hurry because they know the buffer system has this under control, but these two other systems will help to compensate for any changes in blood pH, minutes to hours to 24 hours after the initial shock to the system. There's an important chemical reaction there near the top of 135. It's under the respiratory system. I'll write it up here for you so we can talk about it. How do you get carbon dioxide? What makes carbon dioxide?
Cellular respiration.
Cellular respiration. How do you get rid of CO2?
Exhale.
Exhale. Okay, so what we're looking at here is CO2 can be exhaled.
What page did you say this on?
In the course pack, this is 135.
Let's make this stuff to the screenshot prints off.
You have to have a certain amount of carbon dioxide in your bloodstream at all times for your pH to be balanced. You do not do very well with extra or with too little carbon dioxide, but you've got to have a certain amount. You're always going to have a certain amount if you're alive and breathing, right? Okay, so we can actually modify CO2 levels by increasing breathing rate or decreasing breathing rate. Excess CO2, you might recall from respiratory system, is called what? Excess.
Alkalosis.
Acidosis.
Hypercapnia.
Hypercapnia.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were looking for that. I didn't know you were looking for that. I knew what it was.
For the final sentence rule. Start now. Kim was doing this yesterday because we just talked about spinal cord stuff, and I asked a question and they were like, that deer in headlights thing for a minute there. I'm totally with you. I completely understand you because you're in the semester, your brain's full. So hypercapnia is excess CO2 that leads to hyperventilation because you want to blow off the excess CO2 because excess CO2 makes your bloodstream acidic. Here's how. This water is in your blood plasma, and CO2 most commonly, you might recall from respiratory, most commonly dissolves in blood plasma, forms this middleman, which is carbonic acid. Carbonic acid breaks down to form hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions.
So the CO2 combines with the water and makes carbonic acid.
Right.
And that breaks down, releases the hydrogen.
Right. So which of these can you exhale? All the things on the board.
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide. This is the only thing that you can exhale. Sure, you can blow off some water, but that's not the important thing right now. But the only thing that you can exhale up here is CO2. This is the only thing that's regulated by your respiratory system. If you have a functional respiratory system, you can breathe faster or slower to make sure that your CO2 levels are appropriate. You might recall from, I think it was last Thursday, we talked about the normal range. CO2 should be between 35 and 45 millimeters of mercury. So that's the normal pressure. Anything that exceeds that will send us into what?
Hypercapnia.
hypercapnia and acidosis, and that leads to
Hyperventilation.
hyperventilation. Anything below 35 sends you into alkalosis, and what will you do? Hypoventilate. Good. That's something to keep track of here, because the only thing out of this whole reaction that we can modify by breathing is the CO2 level.
So when you hypoventilate because the CO2 has gotten too low, you're hypoventilating to slow down the breathing so the CO2 can build up in the blood?
Yeah, and ultimately, if you build up CO2, you build up acid.
Okay.
So that's how you bring your blood pH back up.
And you said if you breathe, if you have more than 45, the CO2 is hypercapnia and acid.
Yes, that leads to hypercapnia, you're right.
Okay, because your blood has plenty of plasma, and you build up the CO2, and you release the hydrogen in there,
Exactly.
raising the, lowering the acidity if
Right.
you need to.
Right.
So this is just metabolic acidosis and we're compensating for respiratory output.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what we're putting the whole picture together with. Exactly right. Here's the problem. Some people have respiratory disorders. It could be emphysema, it could be COPD. Somebody could have had a stroke that affects the pons and the medulla where that respiration process is regulated. You could fall and hit your head and just knock yourself out and stop breathing. You could even have a little kid that says, I'm so mad I'm going to hold my breath until I pass out and die. And you say, go ahead. You're not going to die as long as your brain's working okay. So there are conditions here that can actually modify blood pH that the respiratory system cannot accommodate for. So that's where we head to the other end of this reaction. Let's head down here to this end where we now have hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. If I can't get rid of carbon dioxide one way, I'll get rid of it another way. So this is how carbon dioxide travels in the bloodstream. So if we have excess hydrogen ions in the bloodstream due to excess carbon dioxide, I can't breathe it out if I've got emphysema or COPD. I do have another system that helps to get rid of these types of items or helps to retain them if necessary. What is that system?
Metabolic.
Metabolic. And what organ helps handle this for us?
Kidney.
There you go. If you're talking about regulating hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions, that is the metabolic compensation for a respiratory problem, and of course the kidneys handle that for us. You've got a patient with emphysema, they're not able to remove the carbon dioxide from their bloodstream, and they're constantly drifting below 7.35. Their respiratory system can tell them to breathe faster, but it's just not going to be effective. So in order to get that blood pH back to normal, we have to compensate with what the kidneys can do. So you can see here, we've got a situation right now that says if the blood is too acidic, somewhere below 7.35, we can use the kidneys as a compensation. Okay, so here's the thing. I've got a little mental trick to keep this straight, because what I want to do to compensate is I want to increase the pH, right? Because if I'm in acidosis, I need to increase the pH. Keep track of my arrows. To fix this problem, I need to increase secretion of hydrogen ions. You might recall from the urinary system, hydrogens are secreted into the DCT and the collecting duct, they're dumped. They go out in your urine, right? So if you've got a patient who's an acidosis, they will dump excess hydrogen ions out into the urine. Test their urine, it's going to be acidic right now because we're compensating for this acidosis problem. So notice I'm going to keep my up arrows here. Increased hydrogen ion secretion and I'm going to increase bicarbonate.
Reabsorption.
There you go.